Hi, I'm Natalie D'Adamio. I'm an artist, teacher, and guide, and I help people come into their authentic expressions in art and life. And this week's video is all about awarenesses and exploring what it means to show up daily, considering the possibility if you did show up daily, even to a simple drawing practice, what that could do for you, whether you're an artist or non-artist. I'm an encourager art for everyone because I love it so much. So, and there's a lot of emotional and intuitive connections that we make with ourselves, so we can get more intimate with connecting through mark making and drawing and even painting. You develop this relationship with yourself and you start to see what's inside, which oftentimes can be really scary, but it can also be really exciting on the other side. There's that fine line between fear and excitement. So when we investigate what's inside of us and choose to show up daily, we start to develop this internal dialogue and a lot of mark making vocabulary, right? So in this video, we'll be exploring the internal landscapes of our emotions and our imagination in all worlds, and letting the materials determine the direction of the journey and paying attention to those awarenesses. I want to cover materials real fast before we get started here. I like this Canson XL watercolor paper, 140 pound. It's acid free, it's economical, and I like to make a lot of experiments and drawings, so it works really well. Just some acrylic paint, it doesn't matter what brand. I use Amsterdam Golden, Liquitex, house paint even. Charcoal, this is from Derwent. They're water soluble. This is graphite sticks that are also Derwent brand. I'll put everything in the links below. King Art water soluble markers. I'm experimenting with those. They're new. And then these Caran d'Ache. I don't know if I'm saying it right. They are Neo colors for short, and they're water soluble crayons, and they're like wonderful. They're probably one of my favorites. Those are just some of the materials I have. Of course, you can use whatever you have on hand. It doesn't really matter. You could just use a pen and a piece of paper and still have an experience. So it's all about giving yourself the experience. It's not necessarily getting hung up on the materials, and I know it's easy to do. I've been there, but once you can start to learn to let go and just use what you're attracted to, in the sense of like, if that feels good in the moment, to then, you know, pick it up and use it. Or if you see something that maybe is interesting, then use it, you know. It's art making is all about experimentation, and creativity is all about opening the channels to let all of this expression out. Woo! You know, it's all about the energy, baby. Color, light, vitality, getting closer to who we are, not just as artists, but as people. So I encourage you to just use what you have and have an experience and find the moment and discover something you may never have known just by showing up, just by deciding to show up to the process and like decide to look and see what's inside. You never know what's hiding out in those corners. So let's get started. We're not really starting with a preconceived idea, and that's often how I start everything. So there's something about like the way we can hold our material that can alter the expression. we're noticing maybe how you're showing up in the moment. I'm kind of just playing along with the moment. What's going to be interesting to you, and how do you develop, like, what's true? That's about showing. I like a daily practice, even if it's something like this. Oh shoot, that was too much. Because it's gonna lead into when we're starting on these, you know? Or when we're gonna go up to something like this. So it's like building that inner resilience and the wherewithal, not only to show up and make these marks, but to investigate how you're experiencing the relationship with it all, and paying attention to those awarenesses. For instance, I just noticed like that this yellowish green mark was really interesting the way I came in there, and that was different for me, you know, out of 6 years of intensely working. It felt different. I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's going on there? It's not like you get always a definitive answer, but you're paying attention to the feeling of that. There's something about, for me right now, I feel like that was enough expression in the moment, in the marks, and like maybe I would come back to this again, or maybe I would leave it and just let it be what it is for a while. But right now I felt like all those marks, and even just dragging that brush through the color, it was enough. So that's what I'm paying attention to. Like, I felt complete in that moment. So then I want to like move out my paper to have like another experience. Yeah. Other times I'll just start with what I already had going on the brush. So yeah, you can think about how you're holding the brush. Looser, tighter, more vigorous. You know, all those things can kind of dictate energy. Yeah. And that can be controlled, and it can be uncontrolled. So even in a chaotic mark, there can still be control. I think I like to stress that. You know, you're still controlling it, but there's still an energy and a rise of that explosion of the mark. I think sometimes it's misconstrued that there isn't like tender care in maybe a more chaotic work, but there definitely is. There's definitely consideration in it all. But that's when you're building the awarenesses over time to have that consideration. It might not come right away if you're just starting. It probably won't. And perhaps that is where the technical comes in, because once we have the understanding of just certain really basic elements, then we can kind of really go off on our own. But I would say it's also a combination of, especially in the way I look at it, with the emotionality. When I say that, I mean is like, okay, I'll show up in my anger, I'll show up in my grief, I'll show up in when I don't feel like it, actually. Because I'm like, whoa, I want to get curious, what's in there? You know, and that's where you can really start letting go, because you show up on the day you don't think you can, and you have a whole experience that you never thought you would. And that's when it gets real interesting, you know? So it's like, think of yourself as like an adventurer, an investigator, an explorer of color, mark, memory, emotion. And you could stay with something like a page as long as you want. Like right now, I'm lingering here longer than maybe the other one, but it feels good to stay here. So I'm paying attention to that, like subtly, you know. And the other thing is when we're talking about inspiration, it's maybe paying attention to like all those elements around you, or what's super exciting in art, in like what you see in your surroundings, whether that's, you know, nature, urban landscape, all those things like are really impacting us. And even color. So this is just a paper towel. I like using the paper towel for application, because you can just kind of smear it. It's less control. Back of the brush. And like this is from the first, I use this piece of scrapbook page for the first one, but now like I'm like, ooh, I noticed it off the side, and I said, this is interesting to maybe glue in, you know. So these are just like ways we can start building relationships in our own awarenesses and accessing more of the intuition as we create more awareness, and start to add elements in as we go. So it can be quick, and it can be slow, and it can be, you know, sporadic. So now the only thing I feel like is like a graphite mark or something. And now I'll move on. Again, I'm just picking up what was already there and like starting from that. I'm just gravitating towards the color, like the colors that were right next to me from like my last session. There wasn't really, and I love blue, but so it's like go into what you love, you know. Now, also, I want to talk about the paper. I'm thinking about, when we talk about values, which I'll get into later in these channels, but I use the paper as the lightest, like the lightest color. So I'm thinking about that too. That's one way to get my light in without having to think about it too much, because I'm using the paper as the first value. I think about that a lot of the times when I'm adding papers, like how that can create the difference in the value naturally. See, I don't know, today's interesting. What is this, like, jittery scribble thing? I don't know. Maybe it's too much coffee. I'm just kidding. This is good stuff though, because like I'm having a new moment here. And that's what showing up daily will do for you. Even for someone that's been doing it a long time. You know, you're gonna be tapped into your emotion. This was just I just opened this, and sometimes I'll use the lids when I first open it, so I don't waste it. So I'm just noticing, you know, and I think I'll choose color just based off of what I love, not necessarily like I should mix this so-and-so color. But, I mean, I will do that sometimes. I'm not saying it's something I never do. It's just my tendency is to not always go that way. Or, like, have the paint store mix it for me. I don't know. Yeah. These are just, like, water-soluble markers that I found. King Art. Which is kind of cool. If you activate them with the water, they're going to start to bleed. This is just a book page that I'm going to drag through it. Or if I don't drag through it, I might use it to lift the paint. And then these will essentially be collage papers that build on their own, which I like that. I keep talking about that. The happenstance of the moment is something I'm super attracted to, because you never know what could be waiting around that corner in our life. I think these charcoal by Durant, they're also water soluble, which can kind of be a little dangerous. They're fun though. They make a nice dark mark. Then I'm gonna move on. Sometimes it's just fun to start super randomly. You know, let that expression, that energy, that emotion, and then follow what we just, follow the feeling of what was just created through that red. Ooh. And you can be thinking about these points like, you know, this graphite line is moving around the page. So, and this is kind of cutting into that and cutting across. So that's where you're starting to see these points of a slight composition. But I'm more interested in breaking it ultimately, and letting the material kind of do the work, which that sounds weird, I guess, but that's just white paint, and now it's making this pink color. This one's interesting because, I don't know, I didn't have any plan, and I already, just by doing the red to the graphite to this blue marker and pulling in the white, I'm already having this experience, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Even for me. Sometimes, like, when I think about, I want to have maybe all the color. I want to have a little up here or something so it does anchor what's this whole entirety. So I will think about that stuff. You know, it's definitely a game of letting go and then holding on and letting go again. And you're whew. But allowing yourself to let go too. In this kind of work, you know, it depends what you're looking for. So these crayons are also water soluble. I just sprayed that to activate them, let it spread. Now, next to me I have this collage pen, and I see this color there, and I see how this was like a big blank space, kind of. I'm just gonna pull that in. Can already see how that changes the picture so much just by putting that there. It doesn't, well, you could say this is complete, I think, but you have to get someone to agree with you. That's the harder part. But you're the artist, so you can do what you want, right? But when it comes to like the external conversation, that's going to be another story. And a lot of people are going to not agree. So like this could anchor it in, and maybe you just put a little dark right there. But it's all what you want to do, really. I like dragging into the paint. It creates like a subtle difference. That's how I find the difference. This is just a paper towel again. So you could scrunch it, you can swipe it, you can, you know, I don't know what you call that. Get away! Woo! Get out of here! I don't know. So the cool thing about drawing materials and getting comfortable with those kinds of expressions, I feel like when you pick up the paint, you can emulate these feelings, you know, with the brushes. What I'm trying to say is, we just did that crayon, but we can, you know, think about it that way and have that explosion. So there is like this direct connection with this drawing and mark making process that does translate into using the paint. At least that's what I found for myself. And that's what I'm really interested in exploring. Those connections, how it crisscrosses, and it can be all part of the process. Because it is. When we do some drawings like this, or some simple like things, we're gonna, even if we don't have a lot of time during the day, we can do a few of these and still have an expression, and we're staying connected to the energy and the emotion and the mark, and we might find something really cool on a day we didn't think was, you know, possible to find something. And that's really exciting, because when you start to work over time and notice that those connections, and notice that it's not always what it seems, whoa, then you're really going off into your own territory. And that's what I'm excited about, and that's why I'm always showing up to see that happen, because you just never know. You never know. So stay open, stay connected, keep creating your marks and see what happens. So thank you for taking the time to explore and express with me. I hope you gain something from yourself in this discovery of mark making. And let me know if you have a daily practice or if you resist a daily practice and why. I've noticed over time, the more you show up daily, the more you can open wider to all expressions and awarenesses and build that intimacy, trust, and intuition. Also, there's other ways to build intuition, which I'll be bringing them to the channel and talking about the energetic and the shamanic and how it all crisscrosses into the abstract and ethereal. Something I kind of been resisting for a long time and hiding. But the channel is going to be opening up just like I'm opening up. So if you're interested in that, there'll be a lot more coming. Just stay tuned. Thank you for being here. And that's what I mean when I say it's all about the expressive nature of being. How do we live into all of our expressions and, become our most brilliant, bright self in the process and not turn away from what is scary. It's a daily practice and process, and it's a life path, right? Nobody is immune to all the pitfalls and perils and things that get in the way, but we can always start again and we can always show up, in all of our expressions and choose to do that. It's a choice. And it starts with just deciding that, yeah, you're going to do it and you're going to cast out all the stuff that was in the way and just move forward anyway.